Hello, welcome to The Wandering Drew. I am Drew. On this episode, I'd like to continue with the series of episodes that I made regarding taking care of your gear and equipment. And I'm going to finish up what I started with taking care of your big three. And once again, if you're not familiar with the big three, if you're a new hiker, the big three are generally the three items that every hiker will carry and have in common. And that's generally your backpack, some sort of shelter, which is for me a tent usually, but it could be a hammock, and a sleep system, which is generally comprised of a sleeping bag and perhaps a mattress pad or some sort of pad to put the sleeping bag on. I think universally most people carry that. With these items of equipment, there's some housekeeping items you need to do when you return from the trail to keep them working for you, to make sure that they're still working and that they will continue to work for you in the future and they're ready to go back out there on another trip. So in today's episode, I'll be covering really how to take care of your sleeping bag and your sleeping pad, getting it ready for the next adventure, and also discussing some storage. I hope you'll join me. Good morning. Just want to record a little opening to this video that you're about to watch. When I started recording this video, my intention was to do a video in one part on taking care of your sleep system. However, as it progressed, and maybe I'm a little bit talkative, but it quickly became apparent that this video was going to go longer than I originally anticipated in discussing all the things that I wanted to discuss. So I decided to divide it into two sections. So what you'll be watching today is part one of taking care of your sleeping bag and your sleep system. So that includes your mattress pad. And in this video, I will basically cover the maintenance that I do upon returning home. The second part, and what I cover later on, is more longer term care and storage for your sleeping bag. And, putting it away and, how do you store it? So while it goes hand in hand with cleaning it up and getting it ready to go back up on the trail, it became a little bit longer, and I figured, let me split this into two videos because it's already long enough. So there you have it. So what you'll be watching today will be part one. It's a standalone episode, I guess you could say, but this is basically, housekeeping or taking care of your sleep system. Welcome back and thank you. And of all the items in the big three, I think taking care of your sleep system, and your sleeping bag in particular, is really one of the easiest items and the least involved in terms of time and work. It's pretty much a 5-minute job in most cases. But there's still some work that needs to be done. And some of this is not always stuff we think about when we come home. Taking care of gear in the way that's best for the gear isn't always as intuitive as we think it is. So when we talk about our sleeping bag and our sleeping pad or sleeping system, the good thing is that these items generally tend to stay very, very clean compared with the rest of our gear. We usually take very good care of these items because we need them for sleeping every night and every day to help us, especially in a cold environment, really stay safe. But additionally, they generally only come out part of the day, at nighttime usually, inside a semi or quasi-protected environment. Our sleeping bag is usually going to be placed inside the tent, or maybe a hammock if you have one. But like I said, I'm a tent camper, so I'm going to keep with that. But it only comes out and goes right into my tent. It generally does not spend any time outside the tent exposed to, dirt or mud or bad weather. And it's usually put right back in my backpack inside a compression sack to protect it from the environment. So it generally stays pretty clean because there's really no reason for you to take it out and lay it on the ground outside your tent. So they generally stay very, very clean unless you have a mishap. Perhaps you're eating inside your tent and you spill food on it, or coffee or a drink. That's really the only time I would think I would get it really dirty with food or something. Perhaps your tent leaks and it gets water in it, or if someone is careless and obviously spills it outside the tent getting in and out, maybe, or steps on it with a dirty or muddy boot. But other than that, I can't really think of any reason why my sleeping bag would generally get dirty. Even if it gets wet, it's usually in a sack inside my backpack, and it's not going to get dirty. It's just going to get damp or wet. And that's a different sort of concern. So these items generally are staying clean to begin with. So there's not a lot of maintenance that should be needed on them in terms of cleanliness. So I'm going to break down and discuss the two things that we have here that make up a sleep system for most people. So when it comes to mattress pads, you generally have, 2 to 3 types of choices. Most people will go with either a closed cell foam product, and I'm going to grab one here just to show you. This is something like a closed cell foam. This is like a yoga mat actually, but I've seen people use this, or they make similar products. They're foam. They're closed cell because they're not open, so they can't absorb water or moisture. They're sealed. So even if these get wet generally, they're not going to fill up with water and weigh a lot. So the foam, the cells are closed. They're sealed off. So that's what makes them very good. And they're pretty good in terms of they have some R value. The thicker it is, the more the R value will be. So it insulates you from the ground to keep you from getting cold from that cold ground at night. And it also offers some cushioning or padding, which is what we generally want when we're out camping to make it more comfortable for us. So this type of, and this is really easy because it's closed cell. You might get a little dirt on this. This will generally get a little dirtier because it's placed on the ground. A lot of people also use these as a sit pad. So when they come to a rest, they might take something like this and use it to sit on, which means it gets a little dirty. Also, I've been known to actually put my gear on this, or this may be on the bottom of my pack in a roll, sometimes on the bottom or sometimes on the top. So when you put your backpack down, obviously this part is being exposed to the dirt. So there's a likelihood that this might get a little bit of dirt. But it's generally easy to clean these off. You can use, like I always say, a wet bandana or a sponge or a damp bandana to just wipe it down and dry it. You can even spray these with some materials. If it picks up some funk, maybe from sweat or something like that, which it really shouldn't have, but if it gets some odor, you can probably spray it or use some sort of cleaning product on it. That's not going to affect the foam because it's pretty safe and stable. You don't have to worry about harming it. You might be able to scrub that a little bit using like a scrub brush, like I mentioned in the other episodes, something with nylon bristles. I would generally try to avoid that, only because you might start taking out chunks of the foam or damage it. Although it's a possibility if you have a really dirty stain and you want to get it out. I look at it as like, I'm not generally cleaning that. I'm going to wipe it down, maybe just use plain water. I really don't use cleaning supplies on it. I guess you could use some sort of product that would kill bacteria on that if it's got some smell on it and you can't get rid of it. Or even like a Lysol type product, like a spray, can be used on that if you want to get rid of some bacteria or some odor that you're having that's just not drying with airing out. You can obviously put these out in the sun for a little bit to dry out and kill some bacteria. The problem is that generally they tend to hold their shape. So even when you unroll it, they want to curl back up. So you might have to weigh it out a little bit, and that's easy enough to do. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. Another one is a type of thermarest. This is a Z-Rest or a Z-Lite product. It's folded, so it packs up a little smaller. It's got this egg crate kind of design, so it gives more cushioning with less volume and less weight. A lot of people use these as sit pads as well. You can cut off a section and use it. They make them in different sizes, different R values. One with reflective for the winter, or like this for the summer is what I generally have used. Sometimes you have an open design where there's actually holes in the center, and that makes it even lighter. You can wash this off. You can hose it down. I've hosed it with a garden hose. You can use some sort of soapy product to clean it and let it dry. I like to put these out in the sun, let them just dry out, and that usually works for me. Because you have these egg crate design with holes in it, you can get dirt or leaves get stuck in there if you put it on the ground. A lot of times I used to use this when I'm packing up. I would lay this on the ground and then put all my gear on top of this so that it doesn't get dirty and I don't lose anything. So that's another option. What I generally tend to use now, and is also very, very popular, is some type of inflatable. So your inflatable is pretty much cared for the same way. Might want to be a little careful with the product in terms of scrubbing. If I used a scrub brush on that Z-Rest, that Z-Lite pack, I'm afraid I might damage it. This, you can probably use a little as well to scrub, but I would be very, very careful not to get too aggressive and actually damage it. Some of these are a little thinner or a little thicker than others. You got to be careful with this. Additionally, the closed cell foam, you don't worry about it. Even if a knife goes through it or something sharp pokes into it, you're just damaging one little area. The pad still works. The problem with a inflatable is that if you get a hole, it's an air mattress basically. So you generally have a leak and that pad stays flat and now you can't really use it. So you want to be careful to not puncture this where you place it. I don't use it quite the same way. I wouldn't lay this on the ground and throw all my equipment on top of it. I generally wouldn't do that. I would be using something else to do that. So with this type of pad, what you can do is obviously you want to make sure it's still holding air. So if you noted on the trip it deflated, like I had a problem with this one, I believe it's the valve that eventually either wasn't sealed properly or might be leaking. So that's something that I'm going to have to address. Maybe the new ones have a replaceable valve. This is an older style one that I've had for several years. It does not have a replaceable valve. So, and I've since gone to another product that I'm using more often than this, but this is still serviceable and quite good. And maybe for like a summertime, I would use this over the one I just bought because it's made for winter. It would probably be too warm for me in hot weather. So this might be a little better, or I go back to the Z-Rest or a foam product, which is generally a little bit cooler for me with less insulation. The only thing you might do is if you suspect you have a hole or a leak, you want to find that leak and patch it per the manufacturer's directions. Almost all these products usually come with a strip of patching material, which is generally something that you can stick on there and will make it hold air again, and you can continue hiking with it. So you usually want to carry that with you as part of your gear. If you need to find the hole, there's many ways you can do it. If you can't hear the air coming out or feel it coming out with your hand, maybe if you don't know where the hole is, one thing you can do is you can fill this up with air. So you create some air pressure and put it in a pail or a bucket or even in a tub if you're at home, and you'll see a stream of air bubbles coming out. You can also use, much like you would for a tire puncture, soapy water or soap, just so it's bubbling. Spray that over an area or put that on the pad, and wherever the air is leaking, you will generally see a stream of bubbles, or the bubbles, the soapy water on the top will be bubbling up, and you'll be able to see and narrow out the leak. I would mark it somehow if you can't notice it after that. Once you know where a hole is, it's usually easy to find, but you may want to mark it with a marker or a pen or something like that, just so you can find it once you dry off the pad and you're ready to patch it. And you may want to do this in the field if you need to use it, or you may want to take out of the field and then fix it then, or wherever you're at. So that's the only problem I have with inflatables, is that if it fails you on the trail, it fails you. You can't salvage it unless you can patch it. But if you can't patch it, or you don't have your patch kit with you, or you get multiple holes, multiple leaks, air mattress it cannot be used. Where the closed cell foam, the benefit of them are that they're still usable, even if you cut it in half or rip it in pieces, it still is a cushion and it still works. So that's the benefit of that. And on these, I would do the same like I would there. I would generally just wipe it down with maybe water or soapy water, let it air dry, even out in the sun for a little while, and then you're going to be generally good to go. Pack it back up, and you can roll it back up and store it like this till your next adventure. Very, very low maintenance. So now I'm going to go on to what is really the meat of this episode, which is your sleeping bag. That's what we're taking care of. Many sleeping bags are made of new lightweight material. They're very sheer, but they're durable enough for normal wear and tear. They do well with slight abrasiveness if they rub up against something, but they're not very, very sturdy and strong that you want to, abuse them. So you do want to take care of them. I would generally think about long and hard before I started scrubbing a spot or a stain with a scrub brush, because I'm afraid I'm going to damage the fibers. I would stick with using a bandana or a sponge or something soft at first, and maybe try it if I had a real big stain. But generally on your sleeping bag, because they're made with such sheer materials nowadays, 7 denier or 10 denier up to maybe 20 denier, they're very delicate enough that you don't want to be rubbing on them or be abrasive with them. These materials, like I said, they're strong enough, and they're also repellent enough with water and usually dirt that you don't have a problem with it, unless you somehow got it into like mud or your equipment got into a muddy mess. You're generally not going to have to worry about really cleaning them too much. And unless you eat in your tent or maybe spill something like coffee or even food, and it's usually not the food that's a problem, it's generally the sauce or the liquid component of it that will stain the material. But most of these sleeping bags, the fabric is pretty resilient to just surface dirt. And, just taking a bandana or even a wet sponge or a bandana will generally take care of that problem. Maybe where the threads are, you might have a little bit more absorption, but generally there's very little maintenance, if anything, done on this. So the first thing I want to do when I get home is I want to empty out my pack, as I said, and the sleeping bag is going to come out. I'm going to take it out of its compression sack, which is probably how I stored it on the trail, and I'm going to let it loft up a little bit. The other thing you want to do is you want to look for obvious damage when it comes to your sleeping bag. So that means I'm looking for rips and tears. I'm going to go through and I'm going to look for any obviously cuts, rips, or tears in the fabric. And I'll do that on the inside and the outside. And my concern here is that I don't want fill, any of the fill that's inside here, whether it's actual down or synthetic fill, to be coming out. Because as I lose the fill, the bag loses the ability to provide me with warmth, which means it will not work for me in the future. So I definitely want to patch that, whether that's using tape, whether that's using sewing it closed, or sending it back to the manufacturer to be repaired. And if I did have a rip or tear, I would probably contact the manufacturer anyway, because I'm going to want to have that repaired, depending on how big it is. If it's a small tear, a little piece of tape, duct tape, tenacious tape, or something else will do the job for me. You want to go through and you want to look for any feathers that are coming out. And that's not an uncommon occurrence. It is very common for a feather to be sticking out, especially sometimes where the stitching points are. It's already an opening where the thread goes through. Generally, the part that will be coming out is the part of the fill that has a quill with it, because it has a hard section, so it'll poke through the material in the back. If you find the feather sticking out, and just to let you know, I recorded this video once or twice before, and I had a problem with the autofocus. So you may see me put some footage in there where I pulled a feather through. But I did just find one sticking out. I'm going to get really, really close to the camera. I'm hoping it can capture this. So I just noticed a feather sticking up. So what I do is, generally, you don't want to pull that out. I don't know if we can, let's see if it'll focus. So you can see right here, there's a little feather that's sticking up, and you can see it with the ground behind it. So what you want to do is you want to try and grab it from behind and pull it back in. And this may take 1 or 2 times to do. So you don't want to pull the feather out, because once you do that, you lose that feather, and now you have less material, you have less insulation in your, I'm just waiting for it to focus. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to grab it from behind, and it's hard where the stitching is sometimes. So if you can grab it from behind and you can pull it, and you can see right now, I know it was hard to see, I have some other footage, but that's gone. The feather is back inside now. And then I just want to rub that, so hopefully I can get those fibers to seal that hole a little bit, make it a little harder to find a way out of the bag. And I apologize, it's hard to get that close and zoom in. And the autofocus is constantly, I probably should take it off because it's constantly trying to correct. And that's why sometimes you're in your tent, you'll see a little feather, or even at night sometimes you might be moving around and you'll notice a feather floating in the air. It's just a piece of fill that came out of your bag. That's not uncommon, that's quite normal. You don't have unless you have a cut or a tear, it's nothing to worry about. Obviously you don't want to lose any piece of fill if you can, but it's not unheard of or unexpected. The other thing I'm looking for, I want to make sure all these stitchings are in place. And if I have any stitching that's coming loose, I'm going to be trying to watch that. I may even want to reinforce it with another stitch or two, or I may contact the manufacturer and ask them their advice on what to do if it's really pronounced or it's several of the pieces, because there are, there is compartmentalization that's going on. I found a couple of pieces sticking out now. I'm going to try and zoom in on one or two of these and see if I can get that taken care of for the video. Here's a piece of feather that's sticking out. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to grab it from behind so that when you pull and separate the layers, it'll go back in. I admit I'm not doing a good job of recording that. I apologize, but you can understand. There might be some videos online that are a little better. Hopefully one of the videos or just discussing it makes the point. You just want to make sure that when you're pulling the feather back in, oh, here's another one. Okay, so here's a piece of fluff that's there. So what I'm doing is, you can see I'm trying to pull it from behind, and there you can see that it's going in. So I pulled it back inside, and then I just rubbed that because I want to close that cloth, that conduit, so that the feather or another piece of feather or fluff doesn't come back out. So that's it. Hopefully between 3 or 4 of those, I'll have at least one good piece of footage that I can use for the video. So that's it. So I've checked for tears, rips. I've checked for pulled threads or threads that are coming out that may be affecting the integrity of the bag. And I've looked for feathers, and I pulled any feather I saw sticking out back in, or I have no fill coming out. So I'm pretty good with that. The next thing I want to do is unzip the bag all the way, which it kind of is already because I was looking at it on the inside. And I want to open it up. This bag is different. I have a closed foot box, which doesn't allow air to flow through as much, and it only opens up about 3/4. I want to turn the bag inside out. The inside of the bag is the part of the bag that generally gets all the sweat and the stink from you being in the bag. It also is the side that generally gets dirty. This gets dirtier because this is the part that I go in. So if I wear my clothes to hike and I don't change out and I get in the bag, the dirty clothes are inside the bag. And this is the part that gets dirtier. So I want to air this out, and I also want to look at it. Also, don't just neglect the inside of your bag because the outside looks good. The inside of the bag is just as important, if not more important, because it's generally the side that's going to get dirtier. So that's the reason why I want to look at it. And most people don't look at the inside of the bag. I also want to air it out. So what I do for that generally is just to dry this out and to let it air out is I leave it like this. I may lay it on a couch or a chair, just exposed to the air, sometimes a day, sometimes 2, until, you know, that hiker funk is kind of gone. If I have a spray, maybe a neutral type spray that maybe kills bacteria, I might even try using it on it. Be careful. Most of these might have some sort of coating that helps it shed water, and you don't want to damage that. You also don't want to do anything that will dampen out the fill, because you don't want the feathers or the fill to get damp, especially if it's something that's chemical. So I try to use only water on this, but I have been known to use like a Lysol spray or something that removes odors, just to lightly wet it. I'm not dampening it. I'm just going to spray it because I want to kill any bacteria. Remember, I'm sweating a lot in this bag, especially during warmer weather in the middle of the night. Even in the winter, your bag gets warm, you start sweating. You're always sweating in here, and if you're quite warm, you'll actually sweat on this. And I want to make sure I get rid of any bacteria or any smell that's in here. I'm particularly looking for where things come together, where their stitching is. Especially a very common stress point is the zipper itself. because you push against it, or you unzip and it gets hung up, or maybe you try to get out in a hurry and you're actually putting stress on that zipper. The other thing I want to do is, just like my backpack and my tent, I want to look at the zipper. I want to make sure it's running. There's no sticking, no binding, no dirt inside the teeth, no cloth caught in it. If it's not working fine, or I think there's some dirt in there, I want to brush that out. You can use something like a bandana to brush out the dirt. You can even use your nail a little bit. You want to be careful not to damage those teeth. If you need to get in there and you feel you need to, I would use something like a scrub brush. I wouldn't use this one. I would probably use something small like a toothbrush. You could use this to knock some dirt out. If you need to, you can wet it even. That will dissolve some of the dirt. If you have something caught in the teeth and you're having trouble, try to get it out. But you want to try and keep those teeth cleared. If it's just sticking and binding, you feel like it needs some lubrication, once again, I use that beeswax, natural beeswax product, unscented, because I don't want to put anything next to my body or have a smell like a fragrance that could attract animals in the middle of the night to come into my tent or my sleeping bag. So I generally use that. You can use regular wax from like a candle. You just want to rub it on the teeth. I would stay away from any type of product that's made for lubrication, like a WD-40. That's going to, one, smell very badly in your bag. It's going to make the whole bag smell. It's going to generally leave a stain that you're not going to get out. So it's going to stain your bag. It may even affect the fill if it leaks into it. Additionally, that's going to attract dirt. Anything that's damp or wet will generally attract dirt. So if you spray that type of oil will have dirt stick to it because it's wet on the teeth. So now you're actually risk having dirt get stuck in the teeth more frequently than if you just left it alone. So I would probably not use any of those products. The only other product I might want to use is, I've heard of people using like a soap, a bar soap, something non-fragrant, once again, like an ivory soap, and just running it a little bit on there. It's soap, so if you have a problem with it and you put a little water on it or it gets wet, it's just going to wash off. It's soap. And it's generally going to be very neutral. It's not going to affect or damage any coating or any of the feathers or the fill that's in it. So that's most of what I do in there. So I've cleaned it inside out. I've looked at it. I aired it out. I might air it out on the inside, then turn it around, leave it aired out on the outside. I also generally leave it open to the air for like a day or two. I might not do it outside like here, because at night when the moisture comes, or if it rains or snows or something like that, the bag will wick moisture out of the air, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take it in my house to let it dry out. And I might leave it hanging over a chair or a couch or something like that just to dry out. I also put these in the sun, usually for a little bit, 10-15 minutes, just to make sure they're totally dry before I bring them in my house. Usually it also helps kill some bacteria, but I know it helps get rid of that sweat or any moisture that be in there when I first come home. So I'm not going to do that now. Another product that I recommend, and before I go back to sleeping bags, is using a sleeping bag liner. And I've gone to this recently, especially in the hot weather or the cold weather. But during the really hot summer, a sleeping bag is very, very hot. Sometimes I don't even use it. I just lay on top of it for just the comfort, or maybe at the end of the night I might need to put my feet in it to cool off, to warm them up, because the temperature drops, at night as it cools down. But I generally use a sleeping bag liner now. And a sleeping bag liner is exactly that. It's just a liner that goes into its material. It's in the shape of a sleeping bag. And this is the one I just used on the Benhodi. And this is from Sea to Summit. It's polyester. So it has a softer, more, I like to say, luxurious feel than the sleeping bag. These fabrics, 7, 10, 20 denier, they feel plasticky. They feel like a garbage bag sometimes, especially when you're sweating at night. You get in this bag and they feel like you're laying next to plastic. They don't have that nice, comfortable feel. So when you put this in there, it has a more luxurious feel. It feels better against your skin. Not quite like cotton, but it has that feel, so you don't feel like you're in a plastic garbage bag sleeping. So it's a little more comfortable. You can see how sheer this is. This is not very heavy. It's not very thick, but it does help with that. Also, because I'm getting in this product, when I come home, I can take this, and this is machine washable. I can take this, throw it in the machine, my dryer and my washing machine, to dry it and wash it, and I get all the dirt that I don't get in my bag now because the bag was protected. Additionally, The benefits of using a bag liner are, one, it keeps your bag cleaner because this is getting the dirt and the sweat more than your bag is. It's comfortable against your skin. As I said, it feels a little more, what I'm saying, luxurious, but it feels comfortable against the skin. Depending on the type of bag liner you're using, it extends the range that your bag is usable on. So if I use one that I have during the summer, it's made out of silk. It makes the bag feel cooler and more comfortable. So even in a little hot weather, I can use my bag and still feel a little bit more comfortable. It doesn't help that much, but it does when you get in the bag, it feels nicer. It doesn't feel, once again, like you're against that garbage bag, and it does help wick some sweat and moisture away from you. During the winter, when I use this, it adds warmth to the bag. This will add several degrees of usefulness to the bag. So even though my bag is rated, let's say, for 20 degrees, with this, I feel quite comfortable, lowering that or actually being down to 20 degrees. Whereas before, that's like an emergency kind of, temperature. Now it's more usable. I can definitely lower the range because I'm providing more warmth for me with a liner. So that's it. In addition, the benefit is I can wash this much easier than I can my bag. I have generally never washed a sleeping bag. It's not to say you can't do it, I just generally don't do it. Well, thank you again for watching that video. As I discussed in the beginning, and you can tell, obviously, I recorded this at a later date and I'm placing it inside the video. The video you just watched covered, taking care of the maintenance when you come back from the trail for your sleeping bag and also your sleeping pad, and even discussed a sleeping bag liner. In the next video, I'll discuss basically storage for your sleeping bag and some options and also a little longer term care. I hope you'll join me for that. If you like what I'm doing at these videos, please consider leaving a comment, give me a thumbs up, always appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel and pass this information or the channel along to a friend if they're interested in backpacking and hiking and camping as well. Once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch these videos. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Till we meet again.